They zip-tied her wrists like a criminal at 30,000 feet. Everyone stared. The flight attendant smirked, convinced she'd just taken down an unruly passenger who didn't belong in first class. She thought she was protecting the flight. She thought she was untouchable. But she didn't know who was sleeping in seat 1A, just behind the privacy partition. She didn't know that the man about to wake up and walk into that galley wasn't just a passenger. He was the one man who could end her entire career with a single phone call. When he walks in, the silence is louder than a scream. This is the story of the flight crew who froze the girl who fought back, and the brutal karma that followed. The rain was hammering against the glass walls of JFK Terminal 4, creating a grey, miserable backdrop for flight DL492 to London. Inside the first-class cabin of the Boeing 777, the atmosphere was supposed to be one of hushed luxury champagne flutes, clinking cashmere blankets, unfolding the soft hum of the auxiliary power unit. But for 17-year-old Mara Sterling, it felt like a cage. Mara didn't look like the typical first-class passenger. She wasn't wearing a suit, and she wasn't dripping in diamonds. She was wearing an oversized vintage collegiate hoodie, black leggings, and battered Converse sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in chaotic braids, and she had huge noise-cancelling headphones resting around her neck. She looked like a teenager, a tired black teenager who just wanted to sleep. She was the first to board thanks to her status. She found seat 2A, a lie-flat pod that cost more than a Honda Civic, and dropped her backpack onto the leather ottoman. "Excuse me." The voice was sharp, nasal, and dripping with suspicion. Mara froze, then turned. Standing in the aisle was the purser, a woman whose name tag read Bailey. Bailey had the kind of haircut that demanded a manager and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was scanning Mara up and down, her lip curled slightly, as if she smelled something rotting. "Yes?" Mara asked, her voice soft. She reached for her boarding pass in her hoodie pocket. "This is the first-class cabin," Bailey said, not moving to let the other passengers behind her pass. "Economy boarding begins in 20 minutes. You need to head back to row 30 and wait for your group." It wasn't a question. It was a command. Mara blinked. She was used to this. Sadly, she was very used to this. "I know. I'm in seat 2A. She held out her phone, the digital boarding pass illuminating the screen. Mara Sterling. Seat 2A. Priority 1. Bailey didn't even look at the screen. She looked at Mara's hoodie. "Let me see your physical ticket." Sometimes the apps glitch with upgrades that aren't processed correctly. "I don't have a physical ticket. I used the app," Mara said, her patience thinning. "You scanned me at the gate. It beeped green." "Don't take that tone with me." Bailey snapped her voice, rising just enough to draw the attention of the businessman, settling into seat 2F, and the elderly couple in row 3. "I am responsible for the safety and security of this aircraft. If you are attempting to self-upgrade, that is a federal offense. Now show me your ticket, or I will have security escort you off." Mara felt the heat rise in her cheeks. It wasn't embarrassment. It was rage. But her father had taught her better. Never lose your cool, Mara. Silence is louder. "Check the manifest," Mara said calmly. Bailey scoffed. She snatched the tablet from her cart, tapping the screen aggressively. She scrolled down, her finger hovering over 2A. Sterling M. Bailey paused. She frowned. She looked at the name, then back at the girl in the hoodie. Most people would apologize. Most people would say, "Oh, my mistake, welcome aboard." Bailey was not most people. Bailey was a woman who had been flying for 20 years and hated being wrong, especially by a teenager who looked like she should be serving the coffee, not ordering it. "Fine," Bailey muttered, shoving the tablet back onto the cart. "Put your bag in the overhead. And don't block the aisle. We have paying customers trying to board." Mara didn't say a word. She lifted her backpack. It was heavy, filled with AP physics textbooks and a laptop. She struggled for a brief second to hoist it into the high bin. "Careful," Bailey barked, stepping in close, invading Mara's personal space. "You almost hit that gentleman. If you can't handle your carry-on, check it." "I got it," Mara gritted out, shoving the bag in. "What's your attitude?" Bailey hissed, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "I'm watching you. One wrong move, one disturbance, and you're out. Do you understand me?" Mara sat down, buckling her seatbelt with shaking hands. She put her headphones on, not playing any music, just to block out the world. She looked out the window, watching the rain streak the glass. She hoped her dad was already asleep. Damien Sterling, the man in seat 1A. The private suite directly in front of Mara had boarded 10 minutes before everyone else through a VIP service. He had closed the sliding privacy door immediately. He was the CEO of Apex Logistics, a man who moved supply chains for nations. He had been in meetings for 48 hours straight in New York. He had told Mara, "Baby, I love you, but I'm going to be dead to the world for the first 6 hours. Wake me up for dinner." He was asleep. He hadn't heard a thing. And Mara wasn't going to wake him up over a rude flight attendant. She could handle Bailey. Or so she thought. 3 hours into the flight, the cabin was dark. Most passengers were sleeping. The smell of warmed nuts and expensive red wine lingered in the air. Mara was awake. She was working on her college application essay on her laptop, the blue light illuminating her focused face. She needed to use the restroom. She unbuckled, slid her feet into her shoes, and walked quietly toward the front galley lavatory. Bailey was there, leaning against the counter, gossiping with a junior flight attendant named Sarah. Sarah looked uncomfortable. Bailey looked bored. When she saw Mara, Bailey straightened up, blocking the path to the bathroom. "The lavatory is occupied," Bailey lied. The sign on the door clearly read "vacant" in green letters. "The sign says vacant," Mara pointed out, reaching for the handle. Bailey slapped her hand over the door handle. The sound was sharp in the quiet cabin. "I said it's occupied. The pilot is using it. Go to the one in economy." "I'm in first class," Mara said, her voice steady but hard. "I'm allowed to use this restroom." "You are being disruptive," Bailey said, her voice getting louder. "I told you to go to the back. Why can't you people just follow instructions? You people." The air in the galley seemed to vanish. Sarah, the junior attendant, gasped softly. "Bailey, maybe just let her." "Quiet, Sarah," Bailey snapped. She turned back to Mara, her eyes gleaming with malice. "You've been a problem since you boarded, giving me attitude, stomping around. I suspect you're intoxicated." "I'm 17, Mara exclaimed, her voice cracking. "I haven't had anything but water." "Lower your voice," Bailey shouted. Now heads were turning in the cabin. People were waking up. "You are acting erratically. You are threatening a flight crew member. That is a federal crime." "I just need to pee. That's it." Bailey grabbed the intercom phone. "Captain, we have a level 2 threat in the forward galley. Passenger is aggressive and refusing instructions. I need backup." Mara stood there stunned. "Are you crazy? I didn't do anything." "Back up!" Bailey yelled, advancing on Mara. She reached into a compartment and pulled out a pair of heavy-duty plastic zip-tie restraints. These weren't the flimsy ones. These were the ones meant for dangerous criminals. "Put your hands out," Bailey commanded. "No." Mara stepped back, terrified. "I'm not doing that. I want my dad." "Oh, now you're crying for Daddy." Bailey laughed, a cruel, cold sound. "I don't care who your daddy is. On this plane, I am the authority. Give me your hands or I will have the co-pilot come out here and tackle you." The commotion had woken up the cabin. A man in 3C stood up. "Hey, what's going on?" "She's just a kid." "Sit down, sir," Bailey screamed. "Federal regulations do not interfere." Mara was trembling. Tears were streaming down her face. She felt small, helpless, and utterly alone. She held out her hands, defeated. She didn't want to get tackled. She just wanted this nightmare to end. Bailey grabbed Mara's wrists aggressively, twisting them behind her back. She cinched the zip ties tight, too tight. The plastic bit into Mara's skin. "There," Bailey panted, looking around the cabin like a conquering hero. "Threat neutralized. Sarah, watch her. I'm going to write up the report. When we land, the FBI will be waiting for her." She shoved Mara down onto the jump seat, the folding seat for crew. "Sit, and don't you dare move." Mara sat head bowed, sobbing quietly. The pain in her wrists was sharp, but the humiliation burned hotter. She couldn't wipe her tears. Her hands were bound. Bailey turned back to the galley, smoothing her skirt, looking smug. She picked up a bottle of water, taking a sip, looking at Sarah. "See? That's how you handle them. You show fear, they walk all over you. You have to dominate the space." Sarah looked pale. She looked past Bailey toward the front of the cabin. Her eyes went wide. Her jaw dropped. "What?" Bailey asked, annoyed. "What are you staring at?" Bailey turned around. The sliding door to Suite 1A was open. Standing there, in a wrinkled t-shirt and pajama bottoms, was a man. He was 6'3", built like a linebacker, with a shaved head and a beard that was starting to gray. He wasn't wearing a suit, but he carried an aura of power that made the pressurized air in the cabin feel heavy. It was Damien Sterling. He wasn't looking at Bailey. He was looking at Mara, who was curled on the jump seat. Hands bound behind her back, tears dripping off her chin. Then he looked at Bailey. His face didn't show anger. It showed something much, much worse. It showed the kind of calm, calculated destruction that topples empires. He took one step into the galley. "Why?" Damien asked, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "Is my daughter in handcuffs?" The entire first-class cabin held its breath. The silence that followed Damien Sterling's question was heavy, the kind of silence that usually precedes an explosion. Bailey, however, was not the type of woman who recognized danger until it was clamping its jaws around her leg. She saw a man in pajamas. She saw a man breaking rules. She didn't see a threat. She saw another nail to hammer down. "Sir," Bailey said, her voice dripping with that manufactured, condescending authority. "You are interfering with a flight crew member during a security incident. I need you to step back, return to your seat, and buckle up. Immediately." Damien didn't blink. He didn't even look at her. He looked at the white plastic zip ties cutting into Mara's wrists. He saw the way her hands were turning a mottled purple. He saw the terror in her eyes, not the fear of a criminal, but the fear of a child who realizes the adults in charge are monsters. "Daddy," Mara whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't do anything. I just wanted to pee." Damien's jaw tightened. A muscle feathered in his cheek. He took another step forward, entering the galley fully. He towered over Bailey. "I asked you a question," Damien said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously soft. "Why is my daughter in restraints? And why are they tight enough to cut off her circulation?" "Your daughter," Bailey spat the word like it was a slur, "was erratic, aggressive, and refused to follow crew instructions. She attempted to breach the cockpit." "Breach the cockpit," Mara cried out. "I was standing at the bathroom door." "Lies," Bailey said smoothly to Damien. "She's intoxicated. Look at her. She's hysterical. Now, sir, if you do not sit down, I will have to restrain you as well. Do not test me. I have the authority of the Federal Aviation Administration behind me." Damien finally looked at Bailey. He looked at her name tag. Then he looked at her eyes. He smiled, but it was a smile that made Sra, the junior flight attendant, shrink back against the coffee maker. "The FAA," Damien repeated. 49 U.S. Code Section 46504. Interference with flight crew members and attendants. Is that the statute you're quoting at me, Bailey? Bailey blinked, taken aback. Yes. Then you should know, Damien continued, his voice crisp and clear, that the statute requires the passenger to knowingly interfere with the performance of duties. It does not cover a parent inquiring why their minor child is being physically assaulted by a power-tripping employee. Damien turned to Sarah. Do you have a pair of scissors?" Sarah's eyes darted to Bailey, then back to the imposing man in front of her. Yes, in the drawer." "Get them," Damien commanded. "Cut these off her. Now." "Don't you move, Sarah," Bailey shrieked. She positioned herself between Damien and Mara, physically blocking him. "This is a secured situation. The captain has been notified. If you touch her, we make an emergency landing in Nova Scotia, and you both go to federal prison." Damien reached into his pajama pocket. For a split second, Bailey flinched, perhaps thinking he had a weapon. He pulled out a phone, a sleek black satellite phone that bypassed the plane's standard Wi-Fi. "Bailey," Damien said, checking the signal. "You seem to be under the impression that this is a negotiation. It isn't. You have exactly 10 seconds to release my daughter before I make a phone call that will turn your life into a cautionary tale for every flight attendant academy in the country." "You can't use phones on a plane," Bailey yelled, reaching out to grab it. Damien caught her wrist mid-air. He didn't squeeze, but he held her firm. His grip was like iron. "Do not," he whispered, "touch me." He released her, and she stumbled back, clutching her wrist, looking at him with pure shock. Nobody touched Bailey. Bailey was the law. "Captain," Bailey screamed toward the cockpit phone. "Captain!" The cockpit door unlatched. A hush fell over the front of the plane. Captain Miller emerged. He was a grey-haired man with a weary face, looking confused by the shouting. "What is going on out here?" Miller asked, rubbing his eyes. "Bailey, why are you screaming?" "Captain, these two are violent." Bailey pointed a shaking finger at Damien and Mara. "The girl tried to storm the cockpit, and now the father is physically assaulting me. We need to divert. I want them arrested." "Captain." Miller looked at Mara, huddled and crying on the jump seat. He looked at the zip ties. He frowned. Then he looked at Damien. He paused. Captain Miller narrowed his eyes. He leaned forward slightly. He recognized the man, not from the manifest, but from the news, from the Financial Times, from the gala the airline had thrown last year in Dubai. "Wait," Captain Miller said, stepping fully into the galley. "Mr. Sterling." Damien looked at the captain. "Captain Miller, I assume you're aware that your lead flight attendant has just kidnapped and tortured a 17-year-old minor who happens to be a Priority 1 passenger. Kidnapped? Bailey scoffed. She's a threat. She's a child, Damien roared. The sound was so sudden and so loud that the glass coffee pot in the machine rattled. She is an honors student. She has never had a drink in her life, and she is currently losing feeling in her fingers because this woman, he pointed a devastating finger at Bailey, decided she didn't like the way she looked in a hoodie. Captain Miller looked at Bailey. Bailey, did she actually try to breach the cockpit? Be honest. Bailey hesitated. The lie was already out there. She had to commit. Yes. She lunged for the door. I was waiting for the bathroom, Mara sobbed. The sign was green. Sarah, the junior attendant, finally found her voice. She stepped forward, her hands shaking. Captain. Quiet, Sarah, Bailey hissed. No, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. No, I'm not going to jail for this. Captain. She didn't do anything. She just wanted to use the restroom. Bailey told her to go to coach. The girl argued, but she wasn't violent. Bailey just snapped. The silence returned. This time, it was the silence of a career ending. Captain Miller's face went pale. He looked at Bailey with a mix of disbelief and fury. Bailey, give me the scissors. Captain, you can't believe... The scissors, Miller barked. He took the shears from the drawer and knelt down beside Mara. I'm so sorry, young lady. Hold still. He snipped the plastic. Mara gasped as the pressure released, rubbing her raw, indented wrists. Damien was there instantly, pulling her into a hug, kissing her forehead. It's okay, baby. I got you. I'm here. Damien stood up, keeping one arm around his daughter. He looked at the captain, and then he looked at Bailey. Bailey was pale, but she was still standing tall, her arms crossed, defiance etched into her face. She still thought she could spin this. She still thought it was her word against theirs. I will be filing a formal grievance with the union, Bailey muttered. Undermining my authority. Damien stared at her. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked like a man who was about to sign a death warrant. You don't have to worry about the union, Bailey, Damien said. And why is that? She sneered. Because, Damien said, unlocking his phone screen, you don't work for this airline anymore. In fact, I'm not sure this airline is going to exist in its current form by the time we land. The cabin was fully awake now. The other first-class passengers were watching with rapt attention. The businessman in 2F had his phone out, recording. What are you talking about? Captain Miller asked, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. He knew Damien Sterling was powerful, but he didn't know the specifics. Mr. Sterling, let's not make threats. We can resolve this on the ground with customer service. We will offer you a full refund and travel vouchers. Damien actually laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Vouchers. Damien shook his head. Captain, do you know who owns the debt on the new fuel logistics contract your airline just signed at Heathrow? Captain Miller blinked. I fly the planes, Mr. Sterling. I don't handle fuel contracts. My company does, Damien said. Apex Logistics. We are the sole provider of ground handling, catering and refueling for this airline in the UK and the European Union. We signed the renewal yesterday. The ink is barely dry. Bailey rolled her eyes. So what? You drive the gas trucks. Big deal. Damien turned to her, his eyes cold. It means, Bailey, that I am not a passenger. I am a partner. A partner with a termination for cause clause in my contract. Damien tapped a contact on his phone. He didn't dial customer service. He didn't dial a lawyer. He pressed the button for video call. The name on the screen read, Richard Anderson. Captain Miller gasped. He knew that name. Everyone in aviation knew that name. It wasn't the CEO of the airline. It was the chairman of the board, the man who hired and fired the CEOs. The screen connected. The connection was crystal clear thanks to the satellite link. A man in a tuxedo appeared on the screen, background noise suggesting he was at a dinner party. Damien, the man on the screen smiled. It's 3 a.m. in London. I thought you were sleeping on the flight over. Everything okay with the contract? Hello, Richard, Damien said calmly. He held the phone up so the camera captured the entire scene, the galley, the terrified captain, the defiant Bailey and his daughter Mara clutching her bruised wrists. Damien, what is this? Richard's smile vanished. Is that Mara? This is Mara, Damien said. She was just handcuffed, assaulted, and racially profiled by your purser Bailey. Damien looked at her name tag again. Bailey Wilkins, on flight 492. What? Richard's voice was sharp. Handcuffed, why? Because she wanted to use the restroom while black. Damien said, his voice flat. The junior attendant, Sarah, has already confirmed there was no threat. The captain has just removed the restraints that were tight enough to cause nerve damage. Bailey's face went from white to a sickly shade of grey. She recognized the man on the phone. She had seen his picture in the training manuals. She had seen him on the company town halls. Richard, Damien continued, I am invoking Article 14 of our logistics agreement. Material breach of trust and safety. I am pulling Apex from the Heathrow agreement, effective immediately. Damien, wait, Richard pleaded. The noise of the dinner party fading as he clearly stepped into a quiet room. Don't do that. That halts our operations in London. We won't be able to refuel the return flights. It will cost us millions an hour. We can fix this. You can't fix the trauma on my daughter's face with a voucher, Richard, Damien said. Unless what? Richard asked. Name it. Anything. I want 3 things, Damien said, holding up 3 fingers. 1, Damien said, pointing the camera directly at Bailey. She is fired. Not suspended, not investigated. Fired. For cause. Before we touch the ground. I want the termination email in my inbox in 5 minutes. Bailey started to shake. You can't. The union. Quiet, Richard roared from the phone speaker. You are done. Do you hear me? You are finished. 2. Damien continued. I want the police waiting at the gate. Not for my daughter. For her. I am pressing charges for assault and false imprisonment. I want your legal team to facilitate her handover to the London Metropolitan Police. Done, Richard said immediately. I'll call the General Counsel now. And the 3rd, Damien looked at Sarah, the junior attendant who had told the truth. She was trembling, terrified. She was about to lose her job, too. 3, Damien said. Sarah here. She was the only one with a moral compass. She tried to stop it. She told the truth when it mattered. I want her promoted. Make her the purser. And give her a raise. If she faces any retaliation from the other crew, I pull the contract. Agreed, Richard said. I'll have the paperwork started now. Damien, I am so sorry. Please give Mara my love. We will make this right. We'll see, Damien said. He hung up. The galley was silent. Damien slipped the phone back into his pocket. He looked at Bailey. She was slumped against the beverage cart. Her mouth open, her eyes wide, with the realization that her life as she knew it was over. "You have about 4 hours left of this flight, Bailey," Damien said, his voice void of any sympathy. "I suggest you go sit in the back, in economy. Row 30 seems appropriate. Don't let me see your face again." Bailey didn't move. "Go!" Captain Miller shouted, snapping out of his trance. "Get out of my galley. Go to the back. You are relieved of duty." Bailey pushed herself off the cart. She looked at her uniform, then at the passengers staring at her with disgust. She walked down the aisle, the shame burning her skin, past the lie-flat seats, past the premium economy, all the way to the last row near the toilets. Damien put his arm around Mara. "Come on, sweetie. Let's get some ice for those wrists." They sat back down in 1A and 2A. The captain personally brought the ice pack and a glass of sparkling cider for Mara. But the story wasn't over. Because while Damien had handled the business side, the real karma, was just getting started. The businessman in 2F had stopped recording, but he had already hit upload. And by the time Flight 492 landed in London, the world would be watching. While Damien Sterling was systematically dismantling Bailey's career via satellite phone, the man in seat 2F, Mr. Roger Henderson, was busy ensuring the rest of the world knew about it. Henderson was a tech venture capitalist from Seattle. He had paid the exorbitant $70 fee for the high-speed in-flight Wi-Fi. He had recorded the entire incident, from the moment Bailey cinched the zip ties on Mara's wrists to the moment Damien Sterling made the chairman of the board tremble on speakerphone. Henderson didn't just post the video. He curated it. He uploaded the 4-minute clip to Twitter, now ex-TikTok and Instagram simultaneously. He added captions that were accurate, inflammatory, and designed for maximum algorithmic impact. Delta-toned racism. First-class flying while black flight attendant handcuffs innocent teen honors student. Watch what happens when her CEO dad wakes up and ends this woman's whole career. Karma is instant. He tagged the airline. He tagged major news outlets. He tagged black Twitter influencers. At 35,000 feet over the Atlantic, the digital fuse was lit. For the first 20 minutes, the views were in the thousands, mostly late-night scrollers in the US. The comments were immediate and furious. "Her hands are turning purple. That's assault. Who is that dad? His energy is terrifying. I love him. Did she really tell a first-class passenger to go back to coach? The audacity. I hope she gets fired before they land." By the time the flight was 2 hours out from London, the video had breached the mainstream. It had 2 million views on TikTok and was trending #1 nationwide on Twitter. Morning news shows on the East Coast of the US were scrapping their fluff pieces to run the clip during their opening segments. The airline's headquarters in Atlanta was in full meltdown mode. Their social media team was overwhelmed. Their stock price in pre-market trading took a sudden, sharp dip as investors realized the Richard on the phone was their chairman, and the Damien, threatening to pull contracts, was the CEO of Apex Logistics. The financial implications were catastrophic. Back on flight DL-492, the atmosphere had shifted from tense silence to a low, buzzing murmur. Other passengers had purchased Wi-Fi. They were watching the video on their phones, then looking up at Damien and Mara in rows 1 and 2, with a mixture of awe and profound respect. Mara was sitting up now, the ice pack resting on her wrists. They were still red with angry indentations where the plastic had dug in. Damien was holding her hand, his thumb gently stroking her knuckles. He wasn't looking at his phone. His entire focus was on his daughter. Meanwhile, 400 feet back, Bailey Wilkins was experiencing her own personal hell. She was seated in 45C, the very last row of the plane, right next to the economy lavatories. The seat didn't recline because it was against the rear bulkhead. The air was stagnant and smelled faintly of blue chemical disinfectant and human waste every time the lavatory door opened, which was often. She was still wearing her purser uniform, the gold wings pinned to her lapel mocking her. But she had no authority. The economy passengers around her didn't know the full details yet, but they knew something was wrong. Flight attendants didn't sit in passenger seats mid-flight unless they were sick. Bailey sat rigid, staring at the seat back pocket in front of her. Her mind was a whirlwind of denial and panic. "He can't fire me," she thought desperately. "The union will protect me. My 20 years of service. It was a security issue. I followed protocol." She tried to convince herself that Richard Anderson had just been placating an angry customer on the phone. That once they landed, cooler heads would prevail. She would write a report. She would say the girl was belligerent. It would be her word against a teenager's. But deep down, the cold pit in her stomach told her the truth. She remembered the look in Damien Sterling's eyes. It wasn't anger. It was erasure. Sarah, the newly promoted acting purser, came to the back galley to get water. She avoided making eye contact with Bailey. "Sarah," Bailey whispered harshly, grabbing Sarah's sleeve as she passed. "Sarah, you have to back me up. When we land, you have to tell them the girl was aggressive. We have to stick together. Crew unity." Sarah pulled her arm away. She looked down at Bailey, not with fear this time, but with pity. "Crew unity doesn't mean helping you cover up child abuse, Bailey," Sarah said quietly. "I already wrote my statement for the captain. I told the truth." Bailey watched Sarah walk away toward the civility of the front cabins. Bailey was alone in the noise and smell of the back, trapped in a metal tube, hurtling toward a reckoning she couldn't escape. The descent into London Heathrow was bumpy. The plane cut through thick layers of grey cumulus clouds, rain streaking horizontally across the windows. As the landing gear deployed with a heavy clunk, the cabin lights were brought up for arrival. Captain Miller's voice came over the intercom. He sounded exhausted. "Ladies and gentlemen, flight attendants, please prepare for landing. We will be on the ground shortly. The local time is 8:15 a.m. and the temperature is a brisk 10 degrees Celsius. The plane touched down, smoothly reverse thrusters roaring as it braked on the wet tarmac. It taxied toward Terminal 3, moving past the massive hangars and fuel depots that Damien Sterling's company managed. As the plane pulled up to the gate, and the seatbelt sign dinged off, the usual sound of hundreds of seatbelts unbuckling filled the cabin. People stood up, reaching for overhead bins. Then Captain Miller's voice rang out again, sharper this time. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We have a security protocol to complete before anyone can deplane. Please keep the aisles clear. This will only take a moment." A ripple of confusion spread through economy. In first class, everyone knew exactly what was happening. They all remained seated, eyes fixed on the forward cabin door. The jet bridge connected with a heavy metallic thud. The cabin door was disarmed and swung open by the ground crew. Standing in the jet bridge were not airline agents. 3 uniformed officers of the London Metropolitan Police marched onto the plane. They were wearing high-visibility yellow jackets over their dark uniforms, their utility belts heavy with equipment. They were led by a plainclothes detective inspector, a stern-faced woman in a trench coat named D.I. Graham. Bailey, sitting in 45C, craned her neck to see what was happening. When she saw the neon yellow jackets entering the front of the plane, Her breath hitched. No, she thought. They're here for the girl. They bought my story about the cockpit breach. The police didn't stop in first class. They didn't even look at Damien and Mara. They walked with heavy, authoritative boots straight down the aisle, past the silent rows of business class, past premium economy, heading deeper into the plane. The economy cabin went dead silent as the police marched through. 400 heads turned to watch them pass. They reached row 45. D.I. Graham stopped directly in front of Bailey. Bailey looked up, trying to muster her usual glare of authority, but it crumbled instantly. "Are you Bailey Wilkins?" D.I. Graham asked, her voice clipped and professional. "Yes, but I'm the purser, Bailey Wilkins," D.I. Graham interrupted, pulling a small notebook from her pocket. "I am arresting you on suspicion of common assault and false imprisonment of a minor contrary to common law. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence." Bailey's mouth fell open. "Arrested? But she was the threat. I did my job." One of the uniformed constables stepped forward. "Stand up, please, madam." Bailey stood up shakily in the cramped space. The constable pulled out his own pair of handcuffs, cold, heavy steel, not plastic zip ties. "Put your hands behind your back." Bailey hesitated. She looked around at the sea of faces staring at her passengers she had barked orders at during boarding people whose bags she had shoved. They were all watching her being cuffed like a common criminal. "Please," Bailey whispered, tears welling up. "Not here. Don't do this here." "Hands behind your back," the constable repeated firmly. Bailey complied. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs tightening echoed in the silent rear cabin. It was a sound Mara knew too well. "Walk," D.I. Graham commanded. The walk from row 45 to the front exit of a Boeing 787 is long. For Bailey, it was an eternity. She was led down the narrow aisle, her hands shackled behind her back in her own uniform. The silence of the cabin was broken only by the sound of her own sobbing and the clicking of phone cameras. Every passenger was recording the perp walk. As they reached the front galley, Damien stood up. He gently pulled Mara to her feet, positioning her so she was standing tall, right at the edge of seat 1A. Bailey had to walk right past them to get to the door. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen mascara running down her cheeks. She locked eyes with Mara. Mara didn't shrink away. She didn't cry. She stood with perfect posture, her chin lifted, looking at the woman who had tried to break her spirit 3,000 miles ago. Mara's wrists were still red, a visible testament to what had happened. Mara didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The image of the handcuffed flight attendant shuffling past the dignified teenager she had tormented was more powerful than any speech. Bailey looked away first. She couldn't handle the weight of Mara's gaze. The police led Bailey out onto the jet bridge. Damien waited until they were gone. Then he turned to Captain Miller, who was standing by the cockpit door, looking utterly defeated. "Captain," Damien said, "we'll be deplaning now." "Of course, Mr. Sterling," Miller mumbled. "Again, my deepest apologies." Damien took Mara's backpack. He put his arm around her shoulders, shielding her. "You okay, superstar?" he asked softly. Mara took a deep breath of the cool, damp London air, rushing in from the open door. She looked at her dad, then down at her free hands. "Yeah, Dad," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in hours. "I'm okay now. Let's get off this plane." They walked out of the aircraft not as victims, but as victors stepping onto the jet bridge, just as the flashing lights of the police cruisers illuminated the tarmac below. The nightmare flight was over, but the real-world fallout was only just beginning. The moment the wheels of the Boeing 777 kissed the wet tarmac of Heathrow's runway 27R, the world for Bailey Wilkins had effectively ended, though her brain was still desperately trying to reject the new reality. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was suffocating. The usual post-landing bustle, the clicking of seatbelts, the rush for overhead bins was absent. The passengers remained seated, their attention glued to the windows, where blue and red lights were already reflecting off the rain-streaked fuselage. Captain Miller's voice didn't come over the PA system to welcome them to London. Instead, the forward door opened with a mechanical hiss, admitting the damp chill of the English morning and the stern-faced officers of the Metropolitan Police. Bailey, handcuffed and flanked by 2 officers, was led off first. The walk down the jet bridge was a gauntlet of humiliation. Through the glass panels of the bridge, she could see the terminal windows packed with people holding phones. The ramp workers below had stopped loading luggage to watch. She was a spectacle. As she stepped into the terminal building, the flashes started. Not the soft glow of smartphone screens, but the harsh strobe light bursts of professional news cameras. The video uploaded by Mr. Henderson in seat 2F had done more than go viral. It had become a global breaking news event. The Chiron on CNN was already reading airline executive's daughter assaulted mid-flight. Damien Sterling and Mara waited until the police had cleared the area. A special protocol team from Heathrow's VIP service, the Windsor Suite staff, boarded the plane to escort them. Mr. Sterling. Miss Sterling, the lead agent said, her voice hushed and respectful. We have a private car waiting on the tarmac. You won't have to go through the main terminal. Damien nodded his hand firmly on Mara's shoulder. Thank you. Just get us out of here. As they descended the stairs directly to the waiting black Mercedes Maybach, Mara shivered. It wasn't just the cold. The adrenaline that had sustained her during the confrontation was crashing. Her wrists throbbed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Once inside the car, the heavy doors thudded shut, sealing out the noise of the airport. The interior smelled of rich leather and silence. Mara slumped against the seat, pulling her knees to her chest. It's over, baby, Damien said softly, reaching into the mini-fridge to hand her a bottle of water. You're safe. Everyone was looking at me, Mara whispered, staring out the tinted window as the car sped away from the aircraft. They were all filming. I'm going to be a meme, Dad. The girl in the handcuffs. No, Damien said firmly, turning to face her. You are not a meme. You are a survivor of a gross injustice. And the woman who did this to you, she is the one the world is looking at. His phone buzzed in his breast pocket. It was a rhythmic, incessant vibration that hadn't stopped since they reconnected to the cellular network. Damien pulled it out. He ignored the 30 missed calls from various news outlets and opened his email. He found what he was looking for. Subject notice of immediate termination. B. Wilkins. From Global HR Director, Delta Airlines Priority High. Damien handed the phone to Mara. Read this. Mara took the phone. The legal language was dense, but the conclusion was brutal in its clarity. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated for cause under Section 4, Paragraph B of the Collective Bargaining Agreement. Gross misconduct and endangerment of a passenger. You are stripped of all seniority pension matching and flight benefits. Legal counsel has been notified to cooperate fully with UK authorities. She lost her pension, Mara asked, her eyes widening. Dad, she worked there for 20 years. She lost it the second she decided her ego was more important than your safety, Damien said, his voice hard. She broke the contract of trust. When you abuse power, you lose the privilege of holding it. While Damien and Mara were being driven to the Dorchester Hotel, panic was consuming the airline's headquarters in Atlanta. The stock Dow had opened the trading day down 4.2%. By noon, after the perp walk footage hit the internet, it had plummeted 7%. That represented a loss of market capitalization in the billions. Richard Anderson, the chairman who had been on the speakerphone, was currently in a war room surrounded by PR crisis experts. "The narrative is out of control," the VP of Public Relations shouted, pacing the room. "The hashtag #HantBoycott_Delta is trending #1 in the US, UK, and Canada. People are cutting up their loyalty cards on TikTok. And Damien Sterling just put a hold on the fuel logistics contract for Heathrow. If Apex pulls their trucks, our planes don't fly out of London tomorrow." Richard rubbed his temples. "Give Sterling whatever he wants. Settlement, scholarship, public apology. I want a press release out in 20 minutes. And make sure everyone knows that Purser is gone. I want her to be a pariah." "What about the other flight attendant? The one who tried to stop it?" someone asked. "Sarah." Richard looked up. "Make her a hero. Pivot the story. Show that most of our crew are heroes. Give her a promotion, a bonus, put her face on the recruitment brochures. We need a win." Across London, in a holding cell at the Heathrow police station, Bailey Wilkins sat on a cold metal bench. Her uniform was wrinkled. Her shoes had been taken a suicide precaution. The gold wings she had polished that morning lay on a property desk in another room. The door buzzed open, and a duty solicitor, a tired-looking man with coffee stains on his tie, walked in. He didn't look sympathetic. "Ms. Wilkins," he said, sitting down across from her. "I've reviewed the charges. The Crown Prosecution Service is looking to charge you with assault occasioning actual bodily harm, ABH, and false imprisonment. Because the victim is a minor, they are adding aggravating factors." "I was doing my job," Bailey croaked, her voice a shadow of its former nasal command. "She was a threat to the flight." "I've seen the video, Bailey," the solicitor said flatly. "And I've seen the witness statements from the captain and your colleague Sarah. You have no defense. The girl was standing still. You initiated the contact." Bailey stared at the wall. "I want to go home. When is the flight back to New York?" The solicitor sighed. "You don't understand. Your passport has been surrendered. You are a flight risk. You will be remanded in custody until the bail hearing on Monday. And even if you get bail, you cannot leave the UK until the trial concludes. That could be 6 months." Bailey put her head in her hands. 6 months in a foreign country with no job, no money, and no support system. The authority she had clung to for 2 decades had evaporated, leaving her small, alone, and terrified. 3 days later, the airline announced the Mara Sterling Initiative for Aviation Equity. It was a $10 million commitment to fund pilot training for black women. But the real victory came from the ground level. Sarah, the flight attendant who had spoken up, was interviewed on Good Morning America. She looked terrified but resolute. "I didn't do anything special," Sarah said to the camera. "I just saw a girl who was scared, and I knew that if I didn't say something, I was just as guilty as Bailey. Mr. Sterling, he saved me, really. He showed me that telling the truth is the only job security that matters." Damien and Mara watched the interview from their hotel suite. Mara's wrists were still bandaged, healing from the deep bruising. "She's brave," Mara said. "So are you," Damien replied. "You took the hit, Mara, but you changed the industry." 6 months later, the seasons had changed. The grey rain of London felt a lifetime away from the bright, crisp spring air of New York City. Mara sat at the granite island of the Sterling penthouse. The trauma of the flight hadn't vanished. She still got anxious in tight spaces, and she hadn't stepped on a plane since that day. But she was healing. She was seeing a therapist who specialized in acute stress, and she was channeling her energy into her writing. Her laptop was open to the Stanford University portal. The status bar said, "Decision ready." "Dad!" Mara called out, her voice echoing through the massive apartment. "It's here!" Damien came rushing in from the terrace, still wearing his Bluetooth earpiece. He tapped it off immediately. "Don't open it yet. Wait for me." He stood behind her, placing his large, reassuring hands on her shoulders. "Whatever it says, I am proud of you. You know that, right?" "I know," Mara said. Her finger hovered over the mouse. She clicked. Virtual confetti exploded across the screen. "Congratulations. Welcome to the class of 2028. Mara screamed, spinning around in her chair. Damien roared with laughter, scooping her up into a hug that lifted her feet off the floor. "Stanford!" Damien yelled. "West Coast, I knew it!" When he put her down, he looked at her with a seriousness that cut through the celebration. "You wrote the essay about the flight, didn't you?" Mara nodded. "I did." "Can I read it now?" he asked. "You wouldn't let me see it before." Mara opened a file on her desktop and turned the laptop toward him. Damien leaned in. The title of the essay was simply "Turbulence and Truth." He read the opening lines. "Power is often mistaken for volume. We are taught that the loudest voice in the room is the one in charge. But at 35,000 feet, with my hands bound and my dignity stripped away, I learned that true power is quiet. It is the ability to remain human when others are acting like monsters. And it is the understanding that while authority can be given respect, must be earned." Damien read on. She didn't write about Bailey with hatred. She wrote about her with pity, a woman so consumed by her own smallness that she tried to shrink everyone else. And she wrote about her father, not as a CEO or a billionaire, but as a shield. "My father didn't save me with his money," the essay concluded. "He saved me with his presence. He showed me that justice isn't about vengeance. It's about correction. The world is full of Baileys. But if we are brave enough to speak up and lucky enough to be heard, the world can also be full of Sarahs." Damien wiped a tear from his eye. He looked at his daughter, no longer the scared teenager in the hoodie, but a young woman ready to take on the world. "Bailey wanted to ground you," Damien said, his voice thick with emotion. "She wanted to put you in your place." Mara smiled, closing the laptop. "She did, Dad. She put me exactly where I belong." "And where is that? Ready to fly," Mara said. "And somewhere in London, in a small rented flat, awaiting a trial that would likely end in a prison sentence." Bailey Wilkins sat alone, watching the news of the scholarship fund on a cracked TV screen, finally understanding the cost of the lesson she had forced Mara to teach her. And that is the story of how one flight attendant's power trip turned into a career-ending nightmare. It's a brutal reminder that you never truly know who you're dealing with. Bailey thought she was bullying a helpless teenager, but she was actually waking up a sleeping giant. The karma here wasn't just about her getting fired. It was about the world seeing that arrogance and prejudice eventually have a price. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold at 30,000 feet, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about entitled people getting exactly what they deserve, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. What do you think? Was the punishment too harsh, or did Bailey get exactly what she deserved? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.